If you drive half an hour north of Maple Ridge, British Columbia, a city at the northeastern edge of the Greater Vancouver area, you'll leave the lush farmland of the Fraser Valley for a gloomy wooded corridor drawing you into the coast mountains. This road takes you to the southern terminus of Pitt Lake, a large U-shaped body of water sandwiched between the Coquitlam and Garibaldi mountains. With the exception of its southern end, the lonely shores of this glacial lake are silent and desolate, accessible only by boat and floatplane. For over a century, Pitt Lake has earned itself a reputation as a place of mystery. It is the setting of one of Canada's greatest lost treasure legends, a tale of murder, execution, and a secret golden bonanza known as Slumac's Lost Mine. It is said to be home to a species of mysterious black alligator, referred to in cryptozoology books as the Pitt Lake Lizard, and it is the site of several disturbing, unsolved disappearances. Another mystery enshrouding this remote sylvan haunt is the alarming number of wildman reports made by its visitors. The oldest of such stories are the traditional tales of the Katzie, a division of the Central Coast Salish downriver Hulkamalum, endemic to Pitt Lake, its outflow Pitt River, and nearby Pitt Meadows. In his 1955 book, The Faith of a Coast Salish Indian, Canadian anthropologist Diamond Janis explained that an entity called the Timber Giant was one of at least 4 mythical creatures in which the Katzie believed, the other 3 being the two-headed snake, the lightning snake, and the warrior spirit. There are 2 timber giants, Janis wrote, Sasquatch and Shieya. Anyone might meet the former, even a white man, but he would derive no benefit from the encounter, since Sasquatch was an ordinary creature, unable to confer any power. Only a man who purified himself, on the other hand, ever met Shieya, who then became his guardian spirit and gave him great physical strength. Shieya always carried a small stick, one stroke of which would topple down a small tree, 3 strokes the biggest tree in the forest. The Shieya's tree-felling proclivity strongly evokes the Kwakwaka nut seals, or little choppers, described by anthropologist Wayne Suttle's Musqueam informants Andrew and Christine Charles, who are said to have a habit of knocking down dead trees. Interestingly, when Suttles asked the Charles couple their opinion on the Katzie Shieya, they stated that the creature was known as the Siele in their own dialect, and that the Musqueam regarded it as some kind of monkey or something. Later in his 1955 book, Diamond Janis related a story told to him in 1936 by a Katzie shaman named Old Pierre, who lived near the village of Port Hammond, British Columbia, now a suburb of Maple Ridge, which borders the Fraser River. This tale is about a man named Slamakwa, who obtained the guardian spirit of the Shieya. He could strip apart the 2 prongs of an elk skull that 10 strong youths, 5 pulling on each side, could not separate, the anthropologist wrote. On one occasion, Slamakwa's brother used a long pole to tear a strip of birch bark off a tree, and proposed that the 2 of them return the following day to collect the remainder of the bark before another native in need of firewood could avail himself of his work. Without a word, Janis wrote, Slamakwa slapped the trunk of the tree and shook it. All the bark to the very summit broke loose and tumbled down. American anthropologist Wayne P. Suttles commented upon Janis's work with the Katzie in an article entitled On the Cultural Track of the Sasquatch, published in his 1987 anthology Coast Salish Essays. It is not clear in what sense Sasquatch is an ordinary creature, Suttles wrote. Other creatures that Old Pierre said might become guardian spirits include a number of mammals, birds, fishes, reptiles, and even insects, as well as inanimate things, all of which are real to Europeans, and also a number of beings that are mythical to Europeans. These last include beings that have human form, but live far away, where they are encountered by the wandering vitality of the power seeker. Perhaps what made the Sasquatch ordinary to Old Pierre was its being human in attributes and nearby. Suttles went on to describe how he worked with Old Pierre's son, Simon Pierre, in 1952, and obtained different information about the wildman of Katzie tradition than Janis had learned from Pierre Sr. In addition to the Sasquatch and the Shieya, Simon described 2 more human-like monsters, called the Stealat and the Tholmakwas, which he claimed were very similar to the Sasquatch. All 4 creatures had the ability to disappear into thin air. Once up on Pitt Lake, Suttles wrote, an old woman had a sturgeon hanging in front of her house. She saw a Sasquatch wading toward it, and fired a rifle into the water ahead of him, and he was gone. Simon described the Shieya as his father had, as a creature that knocks down trees, and added that it was the meanest of them all. Simon also told Suttles that Slumac, the old Katzie Indian responsible for the tale of lost gold near Pitt Lake, had discovered his legendary bonanza after obtaining the guardianship of a Shieya. Simon also knew of the cannibal ogress called Kulkalit, Suttles continued. She caught children and took them home in a basket and ate them. Pierre told the anthropologist that he had only heard of 2 such beings in existence. One of them was said to have been overpowered by native warriors at what is now Musqueam Village, at the southwestern end of Vancouver's Point Grey Peninsula, and drowned in the Strait of Georgia. Simon described the creature as a spirit, a word which few of Suttles' Katzie informants applied to the legendary wildmen, and declared that it could vanish into thin air, like the other man-like monsters of Katzie tradition. Throughout the late 19th and 20th centuries, untold prospectors wandered into the mountains beyond Pitt Lake in search of Slumac's lost gold, and never returned. While many of these gold seekers likely succumbed to the implacable forces of nature, which reigned supreme in that rugged stretch of West Coast wilderness, there is speculation that some of those who disappeared near Pitt Lake were captured or killed by the wildmen, whom Katzie legend says haunt the slopes. Speculation notwithstanding, the first white men to catch a glimpse of the Pitt Lake wildmen, and live to document their tale, were a stockbroker named Cartwright, a bachelor known to his friends as Carty, who ran an office on Vancouver's Dunsmuir Street with his business partner, Mr. Crickmere, and an unnamed witness with a passion for geology. In 1933, Cartwright, an experienced outdoorsman, organized an 8-man party to investigate rumors of an abandoned mine at the head of Pitt Lake. Among the group were the unnamed witness and his wife. One weekend, the party piled into Cartwright's cabin cruiser motorboat and proceeded up the lonely lake. The unnamed witness described the experience in a letter dated December 15, 1968, sent to John Rodgers, a columnist for the Vancouver Sun. Rodgers, in turn, gave a copy of the letter to Canadian Sasquatch researcher John Willison Green, who reproduced it in his 1970 book, Year of the Sasquatch. In the morning, Rodgers' informant wrote, "We left the rest of the party to amuse themselves for the day, and Carty and I climbed 1,500 feet and rested at the edge of a small plateau to eat our lunch. We had our good haversacks and small hammers, but were otherwise unarmed." A movement behind a thicket some quarter-mile away caught my eye, and I said, "Carty, there's something down there." He looked, and then asked for the field glasses. We both thought it was a black bear feeding on berries. Then he exclaimed, "Here, look at its face." Through the glasses it was quite plain, a human face on a fur-clad body. "What the hell?" I said. "He must be a hermit of some kind. But look at the size of him." Carty replied, "Wait until he leaves, and let us go down and look at the tracks." So we waited. I don't think the creature saw us, though he or she may have sensed us, as presently it went away across the plateau and vanished among the rocks. We went down after a suitable interval and examined the tracks, which were quite distinct. Carty looked pretty grim and said, "Let's go back. What you have just seen is a Sasquatch. Don't mention this to anyone, not even to your wife. No one will believe you. You'll just be laughed at, and you'll have a miserable time of it. Just forget the whole thing and keep quiet." So I did, and I have, until now. In his 1981 book, Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us, Green revealed that Rodgers' informant, in a later letter addressed to himself, explained that the tracks the creature left in the sparse alpine dirt seemed to be large human footprints bereft of claws, and that the berries it had been eating were a type of Oregon grape, tart blue fruits, also known as barberries, which are common in the Pacific Northwest. When it walked, the creature shuffled off on 2 feet without haste. The next major Pitt Lake sighting, which Green included in his books, took place in June 1965, and was unearthed by a 1967 inquiry made by the BC Provincial Museum. While prospecting at an elevation of about 400 feet in the mountains northwest of Pitt Lake, 2 brothers came across fresh footprints in the snow. Although John Green, who covered their discovery in various of his books, chose to keep them anonymous in order to preserve their professional reputations, Irish-American cryptozoologist Peter Byrne identified the siblings as Ron and Loren Welch, whose job was to seek out minerals on behalf of a large mining company. The prints were enormous, Green wrote, twice as long as their own boots, and as wide as a boot is long. In another of his books, the cryptozoologist clarified that the tracks were about 24 inches long and 12 inches wide at the base of the toes. They were perfectly flat, he continued, and showed 4 clear toe impressions, with a big toe on the inside of the foot like a man's. The stride was double a man's stride. Snow in the bottom of the prints was tinted pink. In the midst of the tracks were 3 parallel lines in the snow, which seemed to indicate that the maker of the tracks had been dragging or pushing something. Twin lines on either side of the tracks were deep and narrow, while a solitary line which ran between the footprints was shallow and wide. Keenly aware of the exceptionality of this discovery, one of the brothers produced a pen and paper and made a sketch of the weird prints. The brothers then followed the tracks up a valley to a frozen alpine lake. The prints proceeded across the lake to a large hole in the ice, which appeared to have been made deliberately. Unsure of what to make of the tracks, the brothers began to skirt the edge of the lake. Suddenly, at around noon, they became aware of a colossal figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching them from the other side of the lake. The mysterious observer appeared to be covered with auburn hair, which lightened to a yellow hue around the hands. According to Peter Byrne, the creature was actually a uniform dark brown, almost black. It had a human-like head, massive square shoulders, and long dangling forearms, with hands that reminded the prospectors of canoe paddles. Its hair seemed to be longer on its head and shorter on its arms. The creature swayed from side to side as it watched the prospectors, as if shifting its weight from one foot to the other, its arms dangling loosely at its sides. Judging from the nearby trees, the prospectors estimated that the creature measured between 10 and 14 feet in height. Despite its imposing size, the creature did not seem to pose an immediate threat, and so the unarmed prospectors decided to sit down to enjoy a chocolate bar and a cigarette, content to study their strange observer from a distance. One of the brothers took the opportunity to sketch the figure's outline on the same sheet of paper on which he drew the footprints. When they finished their refreshments, the Welch brothers decided to continue on their journey, leaving the huge creature in its static position at the edge of the trees. The following day, the prospectors discovered 2 pairs of human-like tracks, one 18 inches long and the other 10 inches long, in the hard, compact snow of a neighboring plateau. Like the pair of tracks they had come across the previous day, the larger of these 2 prints led to a small lake, which had a large hole deliberately punched through its center. Several days later, the brothers returned to the scenes of their discoveries by helicopter, accompanied by a reporter from the Vancouver Sun. After photographing the large prints they had first discovered, which were badly melted, they came across another, fresher pair of tracks, which led to the edge of a cliff. In his commentary on the strange discoveries, John Green wrote, "Plainly, the creature they saw had dragged some big object to the lake, and presumably, since no such object was in sight, it had dumped it through the hole, but there is no clue as to what the object may have been. There is an additional possibility that the things that made the tracks were entering the water through the holes they had made in the ice." Green went on to explain that he and fellow Sasquatch researcher, Swiss-Canadian cryptozoologist René de Hinden, flew over the mountains beyond Pitt Lake in a bush plane shortly after they discovered the brothers' tail, but were unable to discover any holes in the ice of alpine lakes. The researchers took this as an indication that whatever operation had been conducted by the makers of the tracks was not a common practice among the wildmen of Pitt Lake. Peter Byrne, conversely, likened the holes in the ice described by the Welch brothers as a similar anomaly discovered by his organization, the International Wildlife Conservation Society, in Elbow Lake, northern Washington, in 1971. The story of the Welch brothers inspired cryptozoologists Loren Coleman and Patrick Weig to designate the Pitt Lake giant, as they called it, a distinct subspecies of North American wildman, in their 1999 book, The Field Guide to Bigfoot, Yeti, and Other Mystery Primates Worldwide. They classified this creature as a member of the true giant family, a taxonomic category of their own devising, whose constituents are described as being generally 10 to 20 feet tall, with lean bodies, and covered with reddish-brown or dark hair that is longer on the head and thinner on the arms. Like the Pitt Lake giant, members of the true giant family were said to leave footprints with 4 visible toes. Other members of this class which appear in Coleman and Weig's book, are Grendel, the monstrous antagonist of the Dark Age Saxon epic Beowulf, which made its home in a Scandinavian swamp, the legendary Amfar Lea Mor, or Big Grey Man, said to haunt the misty slopes and passes of Scotland's second highest mountain, Ben Macdoy, the Tano Giant, supposed to dwell in the mountains of central Ghana, the Nialmo, which abides in the Himalayas of northwestern Nepal, and the Jimbra and Changara, which are said to inhabit the remote outback of western and southern Australia.